From the EPR Creation Studio, this is Doc Staples bringing you a Hot Takes Edition podcast after Florida State drops another ACC game. Mike Norvell seems to be very able to beat SEC opponents, but the ACC has been a whole lot harder. Losing this time 34-31 to Pittsburgh. And, honestly, let's just get straight to it. Actually, this podcast, as always, brought to you by EPR Creations, bringing you the best of internet development and website. Let's try that again. The best of internet marketing and website development for an affordable price by Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty. Luis just texted me, actually. The text that just came through is, not surprised we lost. And that followed by another text from another Florida State fan that I've known since college, who just sent me white supremacy on display. Nice reference to the way that the defense played today. Also brought to you by Shenandoah Newsma of shenrealestate.com in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, and by Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida. Well, and this is a game that, the first half basically went as, it was chapter and verse what we expected in the preview. I mentioned in the preview that this was a game that was absolutely scary for this Florida State team. This Pitt team is a bad matchup for this team defensively and offensively in terms of what they want to do. And, styles make fights. Nevertheless, I did think that FSU would be able to win a relatively close game in this one. Though I did say in the preview that if Florida State was going to win this game, they would probably need Deuce Robinson to go off and have himself a day. And when he went down in the first half, looked like maybe his knee got dinged up a little bit. That was a contact injury, so not normally the kind that's going to result in some sort of ACL sort of thing, but hopefully he's all right. Didn't look great, but it's hard to tell with that sort of thing. Once he went out, I'm sitting there going, because they really needed the sort of trump card on the outside against what this defense likes to do. They bring an extra hat or two into the box constantly. They find ways to make it difficult. That defensive look is one of the most difficult for a quarterback that likes to scramble, because they always have that +1, that kind of green dog addition that makes it very difficult. And because of the structure that they use in coverage, there's just not normally a whole lot of space for guys when they scramble. And you could see that today. Castellanos 8 carries for 12 yards. And look, that's what you're going to get against them. So, offensively, kind of went as you would expect in a lot of ways. Still ended up with 6.6 yards per play, which is right on what we expected. Just didn't finish drives. And that's been a problem all season. And, the thing that killed them was the fumble. That fumble absolutely changed the game. Combination of the penalty, then the fumble, and the following 3 and out, that changed the game. They were in position to win this game going into the second half, and then they just laid a turd. Didn't even lay an egg, laid a turd. Honestly, they ran it 40 carries for 170 yards, 4.3 yards per carry is better than I thought they would have. They ran it better on Pitt than I anticipated. A lot better. But ultimately, you've got to be able to finish drives, and they weren't able to do consistently enough in the passing game. And I thought they'd need to basically live on, sort of the outer half stuff, maybe running some glance stuff, but also outer half stuff. So, your comebacks, your step outs, your verticals, your back shoulders, those sorts of things. And really with Deuce Robinson being the target of a lot of that, I thought that's where they would have to win this game. And when Deuce went out, that was a big uh-oh. And you could tell the difference in the second half. And, on the flip side, the defense struggled in all the ways that they've struggled since that Alabama game. And, let's be honest. If you go back and you watch my film breakdown of Alabama first week, I'm pointing out time after time after time where in the secondary there were plays to be made that Alabama just didn't make. And I'm saying, look, they're going to play against quarterbacks that are going to be able to take advantage of this. And this is going to be a real problem. They got to get this stuff fixed. And now 3 games in a row, you got 3 losses where that's exactly what's happened. Loss after loss after loss, where quarterbacks have just taken advantage of all the space in the secondary. And the biggest reasons for that are, first of all, you're spot dropping so much in the zone stuff that against, and that was, I mean, what did we talk about preseason? If you spot drop, if you run country zone stuff against good quarterbacks, especially without pressure, you're going to get cut up because those quarterbacks are going to find the space in zones. That's why pattern matching became such a thing. And they just don't match. They don't do it as a rule. And when you don't match and when, you're spot dropping and then you're also not getting a whole lot of pressure, good quarterbacks are going to make you pay. And Mason Heinchel, true freshman, first road start, 21 of 29, 321 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. That'll do. Looked really good. And, look, let's be honest. Florida State's played against a slate of 4 really good quarterbacks. Heinchel, obviously the sort of 4th best of that group. Coming in, you'd played against Ty Simpson, you'd played against Chandler Morris, and you played against Carson Beck. Those are 3 high-quality quarterbacks. And then you add Heinchel to that, and he's played really well, but you can't let a true freshman come in and play that well against you. You've got to find ways to pressure him. You've got to find ways to change the picture on him, to take away the space where he wants to look. You got to be able to do those sorts of things. And Florida State was not able to do that. And, number one, like I said, is all the spot dropping, all the spot drop zone stuff. The second thing, though, is they're just, if you look at the back end, the linebackers are slow. The safeties aren't real good in coverage. And so you've got a major problem in the middle of the field with your middle of the field coverage players. And Pitt took advantage of that. I mean, of the 321 yards that Mason Heinchel had in this, 155 of them were on 8 catches to their running back. All they did is get him isolated up on an inside player, whether a safety or linebacker, and let him go to work. And he was just too fast for those guys. You've got to find ways to address that. And there's a point at which, I tweeted out, like, look, if I'm White here, what am I doing? I'm thinking about going to dime or get a fast guy in there, a true coverage guy in there at linebacker, and see if you can find a way to cover. Because the linebackers that they were getting in one-on-one against Reed were getting embarrassed. You can't let that happen over and over again. And they kind of got caught in no man's land defensively, where they weren't getting pressure and they weren't getting good matchups to take away the space and were giving up too much space, or they were getting in one-on-one matchups at times that were really a problem. So, then you're stuck. If you can't pressure and you can't cover, you can't play defense. And, the way that this worked is anytime they brought pressure, that's when they got cut up by those big plays to Reed and other things. Anytime they went into man-to-man and all that, that's what Pitt had. They had little Texas routes and flat routes and things where they're just asking you to cover a guy that you're not a good enough athlete to do. And that's really the problem. Florida State doesn't have the athletes on the back end that Florida State ought to have. And they just don't. And a lot of people are going to point to the defensive line here. It's really not a defensive line problem so much as it is a back end problem. The back end is just not athletic. It's not athletic enough. And that's been the thing that has been picked on the last 3 weeks, is basically getting guys isolated against guys that they're not good enough to cover the guy that they're one-on-one with. Nevertheless, this was a game that even with that, giving up 34 points, you should have won. This is a bad loss. No, it's a bad loss to, I think, a pretty good Pitt team. But, I said, look, coming in, you're going to have to score at least 30 to win this game. They got 31 and lost. Gave up 6.7 yards per play. That's not good enough. 6.6 yards per play offensively, okay, but you can't have that turnover. Can't lose fumbles. They had 2 fumbles. They had 1 lost fumble there. You can't do that. You can't give up 5 sacks. And, most of those sacks are not early pressure. You could see the difference in the two quarterbacks. When Heinzel was able to get the ball out and get it to space, Castellanos was not consistently enough. But, I don't think Castellanos is the reason that you lost this game. 16 of 23, 245, 3 touchdowns, no picks. He's not really the problem here. Not in this one. 40 carries, 170 yards, 4.3 yards per carry. Also not a problem. But you still didn't finish drives. So, looking at the drive chart, what went down? What's the problem? Well, first of all, you only had 11 drives because the defense was on the field a lot. Wasn't able to stop the Pitt offense enough. But, you have touchdown, punt, touchdown, punt, touchdown, punt, field goal, fumble, punt, touchdown. And really, it's the fumble, punt there at the end of the third and the two punts in the fourth quarter. That's what cost you the game on the offensive side. You just, you weren't consistent enough. And, it's the penalty on the one drive. It's the fumble on the other. And that's what kills you. And, that's been the problem the last couple of years. This is the sort of thing that is ultimately going to cost Mike Norvell his job. Is basically just not being good enough to finish. Not being good enough and disciplined enough not to get a key holding penalty or not to get a personal foul penalty in the wrong time or not to drop a screen pass at the wrong time. Those are things that ultimately cost you games. In the last 2 years, 2023, you got to give him that. They played like a championship team. They should have gotten it. They should have gotten the opportunity to go play for it. I still think had they gotten the chance to do it, they might have won it. But if you can't make plays, you're not going to win games. And if you keep finding ways to drop a key ball there, to miss a key block there, it's just one little thing after another, and it's the small details. And yeah, that does come down to coaching. That does come down to those sorts of things in the end. And you do wonder kind of what's missing there in terms of at the root of the team. Now, like I said, I think this is probably it. I don't know that Norvell's going to be able to recover from here. You wonder, okay, if he wins out and he gets wins against Clemson and Florida, maybe that's enough. Because then you go 9-3. You had your 3-game hiccup or whatever. Fine. But I think he lost enough goodwill between last year and this. You've gone a calendar year without an ACC win. You've got 8 straight ACC losses. There's a bunch of people who are coming that want his head on a pike. And it's going to be very, very hard, if not impossible, to win those fans back. Now, to be honest, I actually don't think that firing Mike Norvell is the best way to go. Still don't think that. And the main reason is who out there that you can get, and I think that second part is the key. Who out there that you can get is going to be better as a coach. Now, a bunch of people are saying, look, there's a bunch of people out there who can not go 0-8 in your last 8 games in the ACC, and that I grant. But the thing for me is you go back to what you're looking for is someone who can build the program back to where it was in 2023. We've already seen that he can do that from the bottom and build it back into 2023. I think this year is very much 2022. They had a 3-game losing streak in 2022. To me, and by the way, about the same point in the season, to me, the question, whenever you're going to fire someone, is, and this is why I was cautious about Jimbo Fisher. Don't try to push him out. Don't call his bluff on this because you don't know what's going to come. And there are going to be people who are going to be calling now for Norvell's head. And here's what I'm going to say. A lot of those people are the people who are calling for Jimbo to go in 2016 and 2017, particularly 2017 even at the beginning of the year. But there are people even in 2016 who are kind of like, go get somebody else. There's some folks who were pushing for Willie Taggart and were advocating. Look, I could go get the receipts. There were people who were advocating for Willie Taggart, saying that he would by far be a better option at Florida State than Jimbo Fisher before Fisher decided to leave. They're saying, well, it'd be actually a good thing if Fisher left, if he found a way out, because, then Florida State could go and hire a guy like Willie Taggart. I think he'd kill it at Florida State. Be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for, because it might not actually be better. And so I do wonder, who out there would certainly be better than the progression that we saw from Mike Norvell in 2021, 2022, and 2023. Now, the argument against everything I just said, of course, is, yeah, you had that progression, but, then the snub happened, 2024 happened, and you're 0-8 in your last 8 games in the ACC, and, be careful what you wish for. You're probably not going to get 0-8 in the ACC. And that's the counter. And honestly, I agree. And, I can't disagree there. So, but I'm still a little bit more wait and see. I am not in the call for firing mode yet. And the reason that I'm not is because, look, if he goes out and they win out the remainder of the year, which I don't think is likely to happen, but if they go even 7-5 after 2-10, and they, manage to get a key win against a good team going the remainder of the year, I think you've shown that you've kind of stabilized things to some degree. You do want to keep an eye on that recruiting class and so on, but for me, that you don't want to invest tons of money that could be going into NIL into getting rid of a coach. What you do is you require other things, maybe other changes that need to be made or whatever, but you invest heavily in paying for players. You've got to find ways to make sure that, again, my old coach said multiple times, it was a mantra for him, that the secret to being a great coach is having better players than the coach on the opposite sideline. Well, the biggest thing to me when I look at this is I know that you've got a coach who's already shown that you can win moving forward, but only with players. And what I see out there right now in the secondary and in the back end is I see a team that doesn't have players. They don't have the athletes. They don't have the talent. Now, how much of that is on him? There's a reasonable amount that's on him, but how much of that can basically be addressed by just paying more for the players that you need and going in and bidding the way that a Miami of Florida does, or the way that an Ohio State does. Going in and bringing those guys in. Honestly, that's probably cheaper than making a head coaching change. But I get it. There's a bunch of people out there who really just want a pound of flesh. I understand that. But to me, I look at it and, I was getting a text from Charles Fishbein in the fourth quarter saying this team is just not very talented. And I agree. The thing is, they have a blue chip ratio above 50%. So it's not that there's no recruits or nobody on this team. And on the line of scrimmage, offensive line, they're very good. Very good. Defensive line, they're pretty good. They're probably a top 10 or 15 unit in the country on the defensive line. But linebackers and safeties, they're not that. And some of you are saying they don't have any edge rushers. In this defense, guys, edge rushers aren't defensive ends. They're linebackers. It's the jack. So yeah, I agree. But that's not what I count as defensive line for this. Those guys are linebackers. And in terms of edge rush type guys, they don't really have that. They've got a serious weakness there. So for me, I'm still very much, I tend to be more patient than most. You all know this who've listened to this show for a long time. I tend to be more patient than most. And, I had my concerns and my question marks about this team coming into the year. I questioned whether or not Tommy Castellanos would be able to throw the ball well enough, consistently enough for them to win enough key games. It's been a factor. I had some questions about spot dropping on defense. I think that's been a huge factor. But there've been some other areas where I thought they'd be better. I thought they'd be better overall in the secondary when they went, single coverage or different things. I thought they would be able to finish drives in the running game better than they have. There are certain things that they've been better or worse at, but all in all, I think this team is pretty close to where we all reasonably expected it to be coming into the season. Is that good enough to maintain Mike Norvell's job? I think given 3 straight losses, if I had to bet on it right now, probably not. Should it be? For me, I'm in the wait and see mode in terms of how do you finish the year? What's happening in terms of talent acquisition as you're heading into the early signing period? That's the stuff I'm looking at. I'm more patient than most, and I think Florida State should be more patient. Because again, you're probably better off spending that money on players than you are on spending $60 million plus or $70 million when you start to account for staff, $70 million on coaches. And then you have to go and hire somebody else. And then you might go out and make terrible mistakes. You might hire a Lane Kiffin or a Deion Sanders or, there's any number of really bad things that could happen in terms of replacements. You don't want Lane Kiffin in Tallahassee. You don't want Deion Sanders in Tallahassee. You don't want those kinds of replacements. It could get a lot worse. And, a bunch of people are saying no. Well, no, it couldn't. It can. It can always get worse. Instead of just going 0-8, you could be losing to Pitt, 52 to 17. There's a number of things that could happen. But again, to me, you invest heavily on buying players. It's always where things are, and you go from there. But I know I'm certainly in the minority there. Again, going back to this game, and this is much more hot takes. I'm going to need to look at the film on some things. You were in position. You should have won this football game. And then, you just gave up a touchdown, field goal, touchdown in this game in the second half. And if you let them score on 4 out of 5 drives, and then, you fumble and get penalties and kill yourself, that's going to be that. But to me, this was fairly simple. I had sent a text out to, fellow former walk-on, who's now coaching, Chad Wheeler, shout out to him down there in Georgia. But I'd sent a text out to him before the game saying, I've got legit concern they could lose this one, though. Gonna need Deuce to go for like 200. And, the concerns were ultimately validated. Styles make fights. This was a bad matchup for Florida State, given what Pitt does and on both sides. And Florida State just wasn't good enough to overcome that. Moving forward, they should get a win next week. That's probably not going to feel very good, for a lot of people. A lot of people saying, well, yeah, you should be able to beat Stanford. And yeah, you should be able to move forward from there, beat Wake Forest. Then you got Clemson. That doesn't look real friendly right now. It is what it is. We're going to go ahead and move forward on this. I'll have some film stuff to do later in the week, but again, I just want to reinforce, I do think that there's room for patience. I just don't think Mike Norvell at this point is going to get it. So that's where we are. We'll go ahead and wrap there. Thank you for listening. As always, this has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. If you've been enjoying this podcast, please leave a 5-star rating over at Apple Podcasts and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Post and repost episodes on social media and tell a friend. And if you haven't left a review in a while, do it again. It really does help the visibility of the podcast. Before we go, I'd also like to thank my advertising partners once more. That's EPR Creations, Luis Marquez of Momentum Realty in Jacksonville, Florida, Shenandoah Real Estate in the Research Triangle of North Carolina, Garage Makeovers, the #1 garage remodeling company in South Florida, and Justin Galloway of Benchmark Mortgage, serving Florida, Tennessee, and Kentucky. You can also stop by the Unconquered Shop at unconqueredpodcast.com, where you can buy stickers, pins, magnets, t-shirts, and other swag. I am especially grateful for those of you at the Dynasty level. That is Brian Leininger, Dave Blair, Jack Horton, Jonathan Kennedy, Lee Caswell, Travis Smith, and Tyler Kashishki. You all are far more generous than I deserve. Thanks to you all. This has been Unconquered with Doc Staples. I'm your host, Jason Staples. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your support. I made this.